Hi, I'm Matt from HockeyReviews.ca, and this is the Bauer Shadow Supreme Shadow blocker review. So we have the whole set of the Shadow line, including this Vapor 90, which isn't really the Shadow glove, but it's their 580 Shadow, as well as the pads. We did the puck test machine. We'll be doing the pad review, the glove review, and this one is specifically for the blocker. All thanks to Just Hockey, who sent me their demo set so I can make content on this and make this video. So a very quick thing about this set, I don't have the mock line. I had the 1S blocker from a long time ago because it is one of the best blockers I've ever used, to be honest. I then bought Ultrasonics. I had that custom set. I sold that set. I had a demo set of the mock, which I didn't think was worth really buying when I had the Ultrasonics. And now we have the Shadows. We are going to take a look at this one and see how it is. It's a pretty big departure from what has kind of been done before, and it does something pretty interesting on it, specifically in the hand position. So we're going to talk about all that and do a full review on this. I tested this on a bunch of skates as well as some puck machine in terms of protection on here. So I have a general idea of how this is going to perform and play. We'll see how it compares to one of my favorite blockers of all time, which is the 1S, which is still in my rotation today, even though it is so old, and probably my favorite blocker of all time, which is the Hyperlight 2. And the full review of that one will be coming hopefully soon, but that's a bit of a spoiler for that one. So before we begin all this, let me know in the comments, what is your favorite blocker you've ever used? And could you have made it better? Or did it have a feature that you wanted that could have made it just a little bit better? For example, I like the Hyperlight 2 blocker, but the palm is just too hot. So I wish they did a different palm type design on that. Now, obviously, for the very not important stuff, we are going to look at the graphics, and this is obviously a blacked out design for their stock demo set, so we can't really go into a ton of here how this looks, but I did do some customizers and you can kind of see them right here. Bauer has a history of doing like almost really nice graphics, but just kind of cheapening out, it feels like, for colors, and it's weird because they're all printed, so it's not really cheapening out. But the 1S and kind of the 2S Pro were a good example of that, where the 1S graphic is actually pretty interesting, but it limited it so much on the pads, and well, the blocker, like half of the blocker was covered, so it's not that bad, but the pads, it was like a quarter of the top. This graphic could have been really interesting if it was integrated in with other like options down here, but they always leave it really blank and open. And Bauer now is allowing more customization on it, but they still don't really allow you to really cut things up, and you kind of have to follow their pattern a lot. And yes, all companies, you have to kind of follow the pattern. There's never really anything crossing over on these, and they all kind of have a specific flow to them. So I think they're kind of boring and could be a lot better in that sense. But with this one, I do like how they are adding zones to it. This one definitely feels like it's one of the more zoned pads, especially when I think of back to my days, my 2X Pro pads. And I do really like how Bauer still adds the little texture details and embossing, or I don't know if this is technically debossing because it's pushed in, but you can see it on here, these little triangles, and the detailing on this part as well. I love that little detailing. It's just a really neat touch, just a cool graphic thing. So you do have kind of a 3D look on it. And when you get really close to the graphic, it is kind of cool how they are doing, obviously, the shadow on the word shadow, but the little details in there. So while it is pretty boring because this is all black, it does have kind of cool little textures to it and look to it. It definitely feels like there are so many more zones available on this graphic than what was on there before. This all being a zone and then that being a zone. Well, actually, this is cut in two. It's pretty impressive they did all that. I think it looks okay, but it always follows the same path, and I really do wish there was some way to cut it up. All Bauer graphics are going to be basically this, and that, and you can't really get away from that. You can't really do any other crazy side pieces or anything like that. Now, you can do digiprint, which is a whole other thing, and yes, I love that that's a custom option. I mean, I've done it before to get kind of an old iTech graphic on a modern pad, and I think it looks pretty good, and it's solid, but at the same time, I just wish there was a little bit more on this graphic. But the fact you can select so many colors on there, and you have so much more zones now, I got to give Bauer credit for that, because back in these days there was one zone and that was it. So a lot better improvements now, and can't really complain about it. There's a lot of color options, and if you want to support the channel and Just Hockey, because this video was helpful, check out the link in the description to them. Clicking that link, making a purchase, gives me a kickback. It helps support the channel so I can making content and doing more videos. If you want to support the channel without buying anything through Just Hockey, click the link in the description to Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon. Everything through any of those links in the description always comes back into the channel so I can keep making more content and doing more videos. For blocker shape and everything, you can kind of look at these next to each other, and they're pretty close to each other still. And when you turn them on the side here, you can see this one just does look a little bit more gradual on the slope compared to what this one is. It just looks like it's a bit smaller. Now, this is obviously a much older blocker. Profile of the board here is also that slightly thicker board. It's not a two-piece Hyperlight or anything, but you can see it does taper a bit down there. But compared to the Hyperlight 2, it is completely different. You can see how the Hyperlight really tapers all on the corners and everything, where this one is just tapering at the ends, and the rest of it is pretty solid all the way through. I have no problems with this board. It's solid. It's pretty thin as is, so I don't really think they need to limit anything on there. And it doesn't flex at all, so you can see you have no flex in there, so it's not going to kind of break down that way. Boards in general are going to break down eventually. The material is, I'm not sure exactly if it's this or not. It's not styrofoam. It's a specific type of foam, but boards after hits over and over are eventually going to break down. That's just kind of the way it is. I don't think you can really get around that. And if that happens, it kind of unfortunately happens, but the boards and rebound on these is fantastic for deflecting pucks and everything. You can see it. Compared to the Hyperlight, you can see you have a slight difference on there as well. This is pretty good for deflecting pucks down. It kind of hits there, you push it. These are crazy hard rebounds as is, which I guess we'll jump into right now. Bauer is simply the best for rebounds. And the board on here is simply the best for rebounds. And while I can't open this board up, it does have their curved composite through here as well, which is usually on the top layer. And I think they have it on the bottom now for a brace. For an example of what that is, this is the curved composite from a 1X blocker. This was the board, and this had one of the better rebounding boards that was out there at the time. And it still honestly rebounds very, very well. This curved piece right here, which is actually pretty thin, you can see just adds to the rigidity a bit and helps a bit with those rebounds, but that is basically what is in here, and you get simply the best rebounding blockers that are on the market, and Bauer is still fantastic for it. Shooting pucks off this thing is just absolute rockets, and it continues to be rockets, and Bauer does an excellent job for that. Sidewall on this is very interesting, and it always throws me off just how it looks. It looks absolutely massive, as you can see it right here, and they got rid of the kind of tooth piece right here, as you can see how this just comes across, so you get more coverage on this as well. I don't know how they get away with this. This feels like it's so big compared to every other company. I'm not really going to measure this out or anything, but it just feels like it's taking up a lot of surface area, and it is pretty impressive, to be totally honest. Now, I actually don't like how this comes across right here, and it's not cut in as much. I find this really gets in the way of sticks a lot, and I will mention it more in a little bit, where it kind of forces your hand to hold a specific way. But I find that this piece just kind of gets in the way a bit, and I really do wish it was kind of cut out more so it went further into your fingers, so you had more of a gap like that, and like on the Hyperlight. Now this one's kind of extreme. You can see how far low it goes on the thumb, so it doesn't really need to do that much, but just a little bit more in there so you can kind of hold it a little bit more how you would prefer. When we look at the Sidewall itself, you can see Bauer has gotten so good at these now. Look how stiff that is. So that is obviously a composite board through here. I'm pretty sure it's a composite. If it's not, it's probably a plastic. It's an extremely dense and hard board all the way through here, and even down here too. So you try to flex this, and it doesn't really flex at all. It kind of stays put. It is binded into here with this cord right here, and compared to the old one, which this was pretty solid too, but you can see it flex a bit more, and you can definitely see the difference on here. So Bauer has improved this a lot. Now the old mock was really solid like this as well, so we're really getting kind of older with this one and how much more softer and flexible this one was. But even my Hyperlight 2, you can see moved more than what is on the Shadow here. So the Shadow really brings it to an extremely stiff level. So anything on that board, and anytime you're kind of trying to tuck in here, pucks are going to hit that and stop totally and not flex in. So that is a really solid idea and design on there. Now, if you are someone who likes a softer material and everything, obviously this might feel like it gets in the way. So this would definitely be a better option on the Hyperlight 2, where it does bend over and flex a lot more than what is on the Shadow. Or you could go with that two-piece Hyperlight, which would be a lot more traditional than what this one is. Since we are continuing on to the Sidewall, you can see there is no kind of index finger protection piece put in there, which was on the previous ones. Here it was kind of attached in here, which you could undo yourself. This one, it is this piece right here, this green piece that doesn't really do all that much. It can come out and it kind of sits deeper in there, but it's completely gone on this one because of how much bigger this piece is on there. Now, another piece on here that is kind of interesting is previously Bauer would have this kind of wear guard material right here. Hopefully I can get this on camera. So this material right here was made specifically for wear guards. You can see it kind of bonded onto the nylon on the inside. That is a pretty interesting idea, and you can see it wearing a bit on mine right there. It is totally gone, and Bauer just now wraps over their material right here. So whatever they're calling this now, the Cortec, whatever, if it's still called Cortec, is now just wrapped right through there. So interesting that that is how they decided to go with that. instead of using that other material. You still have the nylon back here, which was on the Hyperlite, but that spot where a stick is all going to rub is all this material right here. And I've talked about this in the past. This stuff gets really stuck on grippy sticks, and I've had issues with grippy sticks. Now, some people have no issues at all. I had to sand down my Bauer sticks in the past and my CCM sticks in the past, just because this stuff I find gets too caught up, as well as the guards right here get too caught up on those sticks, and it's kind of annoying. I like the just normal nylon binding here, or if this is just bindingless, I find that works better for those sticks, and I don't have issues with the grip. But that's a like preference thing. Version it will be more durable, but just a bit harder to use with sticky sticks. And since we are talking about grippy sticks, here is my true Catalyst 9x3 stick, which has that grip on it right here. And when I go into the hand position and try to push it away, it gets stuck, and the fingers and everything are getting stuck on this grip. So it just kind of pulls off, and I can't really poke check with it. It comes off eventually, but it's not smooth at all, and it's not consistent. So that is why I don't really like those grip sticks. Now, continuing on to the thumb here, you do have a nice molded piece on here. So this is either, I think it's a plastic. It's a hard plastic with a bit of padding behind it. But you also do have this extra little pillow in here that isn't massive by any means, but it's just an extra piece that comes all the way back here that gives you a bit extra padding. This, I would prefer it to be thicker like the true ones are, and it just gives it a little bit extra cushioning from impacts through there. You don't really have any padding back here, and this is just like a spandex like material, but honestly it's pretty thick and it runs pretty hot, which is something I noticed. Now this is all spandex as well, and this one is a bit thinner, as you can kind of see my skin coming through it, but this glove and palm runs pretty hot, and I noticed that as well on the Dura Connect on the Hyperlite 2, and not so much on the older ones like this one, which was more of a traditional design. But even this didn't have spandex in it. It just had kind of a little bit breathability of mesh on there. But I just found that these ran really hot, and this is a good kind of example of it. This piece right here runs pretty hot. They could use like air knit or air mesh that they have on some player gloves back there, and I think that would definitely breathe a little bit better than what this is, because this really doesn't breathe all that well and is very, very warm to be inside there. The thumb goes all the way back, and you can see how it's connected through there with that extra pillow. The cuff is ridiculously open, and we'll show that in 1 second. They totally removed that inner cuff, as you can see with this old Free Flex cuff they advertise on there. So a completely different idea and design, and we have seen that since the mock as well. So you really don't need this under cuff all that much anymore, and this opens it up for bigger chest protectors like the Warrior ones. So interesting that that's the case. So yes, it is extremely open, and you can really flex this down a lot because there's really nothing there. And even this isn't tight, so if this was tighter, you could kind of lock it and you wouldn't be able to go that far down, but it isn't. It's loose enough that it works really well. So obviously we have the massive chest in the X4 Pro Plus here, and you can see wrist mobility isn't really hindered all that much. It is when you do this, but you're never doing that as a blocker. Really, blockers are doing this, and I never noticed it once. If you really kind of tweak it back, it will, but I never noticed that the cuff is pretty open, so it moves really well and doesn't get in the way. And this is basically the biggest wrist piece you're going to get. So good job by Bauer. They cut away that inner cuff totally on the mock, and it continues on the Shadow, so you can see how much movement you have on that. Really awesome little feature on here, and this is the nice attention to detail. Bauer has this little Gen Pro tab, so when you want to put the glove on, you need to pull it. You just pull it on and it goes on. Awesome attention to detail. Very easy thing, because this isn't really attached to the palm. Nothing else is really attached to the palm. This used to be attached to the palm, so having that is just a very nice little attention to detail. This whole piece is connected through stitching here, so it would have been nice if this was like a tie, like is what was on these one, just to make it more easier to move. But it's a lot better than what was on the Hyperlite, where I had to cut it because this thing was just way too tight. A good design on that case because it's open, and another nice attention to detail. And I talk about this on basically all blockers. And previously Bauer had it the other way, so you can see they had the sticky side Velcro pointing up there. They reversed it, and so they have the soft side Velcro all right here, and even going over this little loop. So when it is loose like this, the sticky Velcro isn't getting any of your equipment or your jerseys or anything. It's all that soft Velcro. Fantastic attention to detail. I love it. Great job, Bauer. I've been calling that for over and over and over and over and over years now, and you guys changed it from eventually at one point back there. So love that that is a thing. Looking on the backhand padded in their palms, this does just feel like a gray kind of Nash-like material, and it doesn't feel that great, to be honest. It doesn't really feel like AX suede. Maybe it is, but it feels a little bit more cardboardy, I hate to say, than what some of the palms I liked in the past. I think this one was AX suede, and this one just felt nicer, more like a player glove. And even then this one right here did have a bit of that kind of cardboard feeling. It really does feel like a retail modern player glove, to be honest, which isn't the greatest thing because materials have been better in the past, but it's just not the most comfortable and softest thing in the world. And I do find this palm overheats a lot and does feel like it is padded. So right here, you obviously have no padding. It does feel like, well, this is a multi-layer, so I think that's the only padding on there, but it definitely feels like it's padded on the palm right here, and you can definitely feel there is some padding to it and there's some plushness to it, so you have a bit more comfort right there. And while I mentioned how this isn't the most comfortable palm in the world, if it is more durable than some other materials, but I have seen a lot of palms eaten up, especially if you're using normal like tape at the top of your stick and you grip your stick a lot for shooting. This will probably last a bit longer with this type of material. Again, not a huge fan of it, but it's fine. Backhand cuff as well, you can see padding in there, and it does feel like it is sloped to fit in your wrist, so you can see how it angles up here and angles up here and kind of holds your wrist in place, which is a nice touch. And that wasn't the case on the older ones, really. This one was all pretty just like a flat material on here, where this one definitely does feel like it's angled a lot, and it definitely feels like you're more snug and kind of locked in place in there when it is like that. So it is nice in that sense. Now, for the foam back here, you can see the pillow back here. When you really take a look, it is kind of positioned in here, and you can see the little white piece right here. It is a pretty solidly dense foam. I can push it in, which is fine, and you kind of need that for a bit of comfort on there, but I didn't really feel any shots on it from when I did my testing and from when I played with it. My ultrasonic was way worse than what this one is, so this one is definitely an upgrade in that, and I've had zero issues with my Hyperlight 2 for that as well. So the fact that Bauer has kind of moved away with that is nicer, and this is definitely more beefy and protective than what the old ones were. Core Tech, which are Coreshorts, and people have heard of these before. They were labeled under Under Armour before. Now Bauer sells hockey specific one, but Core themselves sell their own line of pants and supportive clothing and apparel. Basically, this stuff helps you with growing strains, growing pulls, and helps keep your hips tight and everything like that. And speaking of injuries, I kind of pulled a growing playing in the playoffs a few months ago and have had to keep using these Core Tech shorts to make sure my growing doesn't get worse. When I don't wear them, I can feel it and it hurts kind of to walk the next day. With these, keeps everything nice and tight and keeps everything from stretching out too far and getting injured. So these have been a huge savior for me. Check out the link in the description to their website and use my coupon code that's in there to get a discount, and I'll put it on the screen here. It helps support myself and the channel so I can make content and doing real reviews, but also you get a solid product that I use all the time. Now, so for this tooth piece right here, you can see how it does a pretty good job of covering that up and sealing that up. It is only a single layer on this shell though, where previously with designs like this, you would kind of get this one, then this one, but you still get that inner finger piece as well. It's just hidden kind of behind there. So you do get multiple layers there. Nothing back here though, but that is so hard and solid that as long as your stick is in the position where it should be, it's going to hit that and your fingers are going to be really protected. Not a block you really need a paddle wedge with unless you kind of hold it differently. Even then, when you don't hold it kind of the way it wants you to, it still works pretty well. But when you do hold it the way it kind of forces your hand and wants to, it really locks that in. So very solid design there. And as a comparison, you can see the difference on that Hyperlight 2, where that piece doesn't really come down there and you can't even really get it close to hitting that stick. So the paddle wedge would definitely come more in handy on this, because as you can see, the difference in protection on there. And a comparison on how it was done before, you can see you have that double layer with this and that piece on the index finger, but this part never really kind of came out. But you can see how much more open it is and how much easier this is for me to slide this stick. Much easier because of that design. So it's kind of, you gain one thing, you lose another thing. I'm sure this stuff will break in after using it a lot, or if you get a less grippy stick, you won't have an issue, because I don't have an issue with my Warrior sticks. And personally, while I love the protection of the Shadow, it's so tight on there that it kind of does feel a bit limited, especially with your hand movements and everything. It just feels like it really locks in place. I'm not the biggest fan of that, but the protection level is insane, so I have to give them credit for that. Bauer was leading in fingertip and index finger protection for a while in terms of overall coverage. You can see the 1S is still honestly one of the best in the industry, because this has a piece right here that moves, and this is attached right to the end piece, so it kind of comes down and covers your index finger as much as possible. And this comes down as well because it's attached to your middle finger right there, or my ring finger actually. It comes down and covers that really well. So this was a really solid design and really well done. When we go into this position, you can see this one still works really well on the fingertips because it's massive and really comes down. It's nice and sloped as well, so you're getting a lot of finger protection on here as well as fingertip protection with this coming down. So when you land, you're basically going to be covered like that, and stick jams and stuff will have to go through this as well. Or if you're hugging the post, that will be covering the tops of your fingers. So excellent design here. You can see how the index finger protection specifically has kind of not been as good, and this I believe is all more or less to do with the new hand position. This piece is still a secondary piece, as you can see, and it is still kind of sloped a bit, but it doesn't come down nearly as much, and it's not attached to the fingertip anymore, as you can see. And it is attached on both sides, so it shouldn't twist all that much, but you can see it does twist ever so slightly, so it's not the best. It could be a little bit better, and I think Bauer should kind of take from what Vaughn does, where this is just all one gusset of palm material and not spandex, which spandex is really comfortable and really nice, but it would kind of seal that a little bit better. And when you look at your other hand, you can see they're attached right in the middle, so they do kind of come down the right way. So you're not going to get kind of the gusset and the side on your stick. You're going to get the actual palm material itself. But you can see that a little twisting on the index finger, but when you put your hand out there, obviously that's going to sit flat, so it's not a big deal. But just with this new design, how it's back here, and it's not really pulling this down to cover it as much, so this can be a little bit exposed. It is on my stick, so it's not that bad. And going down, you can see this is still going to protect sticks coming in from this way from hitting your fingertips, hopefully. Overall, still a really good design. I think they have done it slightly better on the index finger before, but this is still very good. Bauer is no longer using Poron XRD foam, and I thought this one had it labeled somewhere. But anyways, they no longer use Poron on anything, or at least they're very, very limiting it. They're now using their Cloud DCT thing, which is this Defense Cloud technology. And Bauer now has the best index finger protection for the sides, and I'll show you that off that in a second. So previously you had these two layers here, but this one kind of never really came down, so you don't have really three. This I think was supposed to be Poron, but it doesn't really feel like that piece is Poron. You can see the logo right there, and it doesn't like really feel like it's Poron. But anyways, there's a piece of foam here and then a piece of foam here, but you can see the thickness of it when we look at the new design. And this is also on the Hyperlight 2. You can see how massive that is. This is a massive piece of foam. You can see, look at the foam on there, and it's not the most dense thing, but it does feel like kind of those smart jelly foams like what Poron was and what D3O can be. It's not as dense as D3O, so I don't think you're going to get the protection there as D3O, and it's definitely lighter, it feels, than Poron. But that is a massive piece of soft foam, so pucks hitting this are going to be dampened a lot through this, and sticks, if they come through here, will be dampened a lot through that too. So this is a fantastic design in terms of protection, and is probably one of the leading, I think, designs overall. I always talk to how good Brian's designs are because they have padding on the index finger, and Bauer has done that too. So they have a little piece of foam, very, very low density foam in here. You can see it squishing, but that's on the side. So now you have that, and that piece for impact dispersion on this. Amazing design by Bauer on here. This is like phenomenal, and whoever did this deserves a ton of credit. This piece is really awesome, and they're really kind of looking at that, and it's really solid overall. Back here you have a more dense foam, so it's not that DCT right here, and on the backhand here it just feels like a hard density foam through it. You can hear it right there. It's not a plastic, it doesn't feel like. It's pretty flexible, but it doesn't feel like it's that DCT right here. So maybe that DCT could have gone all the way around. It would have been nice. Then on the side, you can see it also is a pretty dense foam, but not that DCT all through it as well. The one thing Bauer has done in the past is they've had D3O on the top pieces of your fingers. So basically back here where my finger is kind of squeezing. It does feel like there's something back here, and you can kind of push down and feel a little bit down there, but I don't know if that really is the DCT or what is back there anymore, if they actually added foam back there, or it's just, it does feel like there is definitely foam back there, but it used to be Poron. And on the ultrasonic gloves, I think they had an issue where the backhand back here was kind of falling out. You could see the little pieces of Poron. That's not in there anymore, so that's a slight downgrade, but that's a massive nitpick, and most people probably wouldn't even notice that. And there is slight foam back there as is, so you do get a bit of padding. It's just not as good as what the Poron was. Now you can also adjust these fingers, so you can see this is Velcroable. You can move it up and down so your fingers kind of come further in and out of this. If you loosen this all the way, this won't come down as much. Obviously, if you tighten it, it will follow your fingers more. So excellent design for customization. If you really want to pull them all out, you could. So this would just flap out and be like a very old school glove. Great idea with that one. It's not on this piece, but it is on this piece. So overall, the finger protection on this is really, really good. Now, hand position on this glove, I feel like has definitely changed since the old 1S. I definitely feel like it moved down a little bit, so it's more kind of almost centered. Now with that said, the Hyperlight 2 moved down, so it's lower. So the Hyperlight 2 is basically now, spoiler for this review, the 2-piece Hyperlight, but in a more modern kind of shape. The hand position, everything of it is a lot, your fingers are a lot lower. This one feels like it kind of moved down, and it's not so aggressively high on this one, and high I mean up. So as a comparison really quick with the Hyperlight 2, when we put it on here, you can see my kind of birthmark right there. You can see where the board comes up to, it comes up to right there, and your hands, like your fingertips, are right at the end of the board. So not all the way down the board like old Vons, and I think two-piece Hyperlight is pretty close to that, but not extreme. And when we go like this, you can see it's definitely up a little bit more, but it's not as extreme as it once was, and your fingertips are basically kind of right here. So not nearly as low as what is on the Hyperlight 2, but it is still kind of a more neutral shape than what Supreme gloves were in the past. Because we look at this glove and my fingertip is kind of up here when you come down, and when we kind of look at that birthmark again, you can see it's really up there. So it's just moving slightly a little bit over and over again. This one definitely felt like it was higher. The Shadow feels like it's slightly lower. Hyperlight 2 comes down a lot lower, which makes sense for this one because I felt like this line and the old Supreme line, well, like the Mach, Ultrasonic and everything, were too similar in hand positions. Now that they fixed that is nice, so this gives you kind of a nice option. Personally, I understand why people want a slightly more neutral hand position on this. I love the hand position on this because if you get low shots that you have to reach for, when your hand's more up here, the blocker itself can reach lower and get those lower blocker shots, which are really hard to get. When that happens, the board twists because of balance. So when you're kind of like this, and it kind of has a tendency to go like that. Whereas when you're in this board, you can't quite reach as far, but when it hits down here, it doesn't twist as much because your hand's kind of more in the center of it. So when you're doing that reach, it doesn't twist and kind of tilt over, and it's a more balanced overall approach. So I don't have really complaints about it. I personally would wish it was more like this one just to really differentiate these two lines, but I get why they kind of did that, and honestly it feels totally fine and it feels really well balanced. And speaking of balance, when it's on your hand, it feels really solid. There's like not really a ton of twisting going on. It doesn't feel like it's falling off. It's really solid overall, and it feels like a very well designed. Now with that said, when you put it next to the Hyperlight, does it feel any different? It feels slightly heavier, but that's honestly just feels more of the hand position because the board balance feels like it's a little lower on your hands. Like there's more board below your hand, so it's not up here, so it's not quite as much weight right on your hand. But when you hold them like next to each other, they honestly feel so similar that the weight really doesn't matter. It might be slightly heavier, but maybe not. It doesn't matter. They're all light enough now that you're not wearing this and you're like, wow, that's really heavy. I need to get lighter. I need to work out more because it's so heavy. It's not. It feels fantastic and it's really solid. 4 paddle down on this. This is actually the worst implementation I've used in a really long time of Bauer gloves. So they changed the hand positioning, which I've talked about. But this piece right here just kind of sits over the paddle right here. And I notice it gets in the way a lot. When I go paddle down, it's kind of getting squished, as you can hopefully see. And I noticed when playing that it would squish my fingers as well. So if you get it in the wrong spot, kind of on the side right here, I would notice that this finger would end up getting squished a bunch, which was not very comfortable and not very nice. And as well, going paddle down, it does leave this up a bit. And I've noticed this, like you have to really think about getting that flat. It does leave it up there. It's not bad here, but it is definitely over there, and it's the worst implementation of a Bauer one I've definitely felt. I can also feel this piece right here getting kind of stuck on the ice. Even though it folds over with your fingers, you can really feel it kind of being squished between the shaft. So when you're doing this, you really kind of have to lean forward onto this piece to get that part sealed, and then it works well. But for natural for me, I was going like this, and this part was coming off. Probably not bad enough to really do anything, especially if puck's coming here, you're probably fine. So it's not like those old Warrior bads, but it's something I noticed, and it's something a lot worse I find than old Bauer blockers. I've had people ask me over and over again of what socks I always recommend, and I've been using Cutshield for a while now. I have multiple stuff for them. So Cutshield is a company out of Canada that makes cut resistant socks, and these are their Pro Air 6, which means it's an ANSI level 6 for cut resistance on here. Full review of it up there, so you can check it out. But I now have a coupon code with Cutshield, so if you want to support the channel, you can check out the link in the description to Cutshield, buy some socks, which I think are honestly one of the better socks on the market. I absolutely love them. They're pretty thin, and they are cut resistant, and they're not too hot either. Use my coupon code, you get 25% off, and it helps support the channel. So new for this blocker this year is it actually kind of adjusts your hand position quite a bit, and it forces you to hold the stick a certain way. You can see the kind of index finger right here and how flat it sits on there. And when I go like this, it's harder to see because it has all the protective pieces, but it really forces your fingers and your hand on an angle. This is a lot more sloped towards the blade. My index finger is, and my fingers are kind of the opposite just because they have to fit around this part right here. But really my hand is a lot more down this way than I prefer and that I would like, but it's really the shape of the palm and the blocker kind of forcing that. And what that ends up causing to happen is it does end up causing kind of the stick to tilt. And for me, and a lot of goalies, they kind of end up doing this on the heel, especially if you have a stick that's slightly too big. And it kind of forces this position a lot more, which is an interesting idea and kind of makes sense and is something you kind of want. For me, it's extremely uncomfortable and I don't like it at all. My hands feel totally awkward in here, and it really feels like I want to cut out like basically this piece to go in or something on here. I don't even care about the trigger for this. That doesn't bother me putting it across the paddle, but this just gets in the way. So I almost have to cut out a piece right here in order to use this, because this is just like leaning against this. It's really awkward. It's almost like I have to do double trigger, which doesn't feel right at all. And it's like too awkward. So I kind of have to leave it around, but it gets caught up on here and it's very uncomfortable. But it does force your hand to kind of hold the stick in a different way. That helps with that stick and blade position on the ice. Again, it's a new change. I've seen coaches and I've had coaches talk to me about this, and like people using different hand positions and especially paddle lengths to kind of make sure your stick is sealed. This blocker kind of forces that and kind of does it for you a little bit. And as a comparison, when I'm wearing this, hopefully it shows off. The blocker is kind of pointing straight down instead of kind of pointing like this. And this just feels so much more natural and comfortable to me. Using the same overall shape, but this isn't being forced down, and my blocker isn't, and my hand isn't being forced down towards the blade as much. So when I kind of put it on, it feels a lot more natural. And yes, my blade is still kind of flat on here. That hand position that the other blocker, the new Shadow, really forces is kind of helps with that a lot. And you see a lot of goalies like this, and you see goalies in the NHL like Logan Thompson like this too. That different hand position kind of helps pull that blocker up a bit. I'm not saying that that blocker forces this, and that's how this works. This is all about hand positioning and the right paddle size and everything and the right lie angle. But that blocker definitely kind of contributes to how that stick sits. And I know it's moving and standing up, going around, it would sit flatter. For me in this position, obviously it's sitting flat, and this is how it kind of works for me. But this blocker feels much more natural than the Shadow does, but the Shadow does have that change on it that is pretty significant. I talked about the hand positioning, and I have seen a bunch of goalie coaches, and I've talked to goalie coaches who specifically mentioned this should be the hand position, this is the proper hand position. I don't necessarily agree that there's a yes, you should do this for all positions. I think people can do their own styles and figure out what works for them. But with that said, it is doing something different, and I can't hate on doing something different, even though I don't prefer it. So if I was a pro goalie and I wanted a Bauer glove, I'd probably end up getting a 2S Pro, or I would try to get a stiffer sidewall on this 1S, but a 2S Pro is probably the best option for it. I wouldn't get this one. It's a personal preference thing. This isn't the worst thing in the world, but I just don't feel as comfortable with it. And I think you should just try it on. And if you don't notice it, all the better. And if you do notice it, just see if you can get away with it and see if it will work for you. So while this is a demo set and I can't really speak all that much about durability because it hasn't been used much, you can see fraying on the sides kind of right here. So I don't know if this got caught in Velcro or something somewhere, but there is fraying on here. And Bauer has unfortunately been known to use weaker seams and stitches than what other companies do. And it's always a question of, is the durability going to be there? Honestly, I've used this Hyperlite 2 quite a bit, and it looks pretty flawless, to be completely honest. There's some wear right here, but it's on the wear guard, so it's supposed to be there. And overall, it's pretty good. So I can't really complain with that much. There is a bit of wear down there, which also is kind of a common spot because it hits the ice. But overall, I can't really complain about it. And even if they do use the kind of smaller threads that they shouldn't be, and companies kind of talk about and manufacturers talk about, that Bauer kind of cheapens out on a little bit. Mine has stood up really well. This one has a bit of fraying on there, which I'm a little bit concerned about. But overall, I can't see it being a huge issue. I do kind of wish they added this type of wear patch or something, like what they did right here, or what CCM is doing with their kind of 3M almost plastic tape over the corners, just to kind of help with wear on this side, especially because this is a binding piece. So you have kind of multiple sew spots through there, and it kind of just sticks out a little bit because it's a bindingless design. So that would be nice, just have a little bit more durability right on that spot. It's not a huge deal at all. It's a massive nitpick, but just want to call it out. That's about it for the Bauer Shadow, I guess Supreme Shadow review for the blocker. I have been a huge fan of Bauer blockers for a long time. I even made a hashtag up and tried to get Bauer to come out with a 2-piece Hyperlite, which they did. So I am a huge fan of Bauer blockers, and I don't believe a blocker is a blocker. I believe there are better ones and there are worse ones, and this is certainly one of them. Now, this is not my preference. I don't like that hand position, but the rebounds are fantastic. The sidewall is fantastic. I don't like how limiting this is, but the protection on it is fantastic. Basically the best fingertip and index finger protection on the market. It is a ridiculously good design. So Bauer deserves deserves a ton of credit right there. I mentioned the rebounds, but it can't be stated enough of how powerful those rebounds are and how good they are. While this isn't my favorite in terms of preference of just how it feels on me and the hand position, it is an excellent blocker and one I can easily recommend to people. And it once again kind of keeps Bauer at the top of the level for blockers, to be totally honest. Hard to beat this. This is very, very, very good. If you're looking for the best piece of like each specific gear from all the brands, Bauer still has the blockers covered. It's just the way it is. This blocker is great. This blocker is great. Find out which balance point you want, which hand position you want, and you're probably golden. Thank you very much for watching this video. Hopefully it was helpful. Remember, subscribe to me on YouTube, follow me on Instagram and TikTok, links in the description. So again, huge thanks to Just Hockey who helped me do this review and review the whole set with their demo set. If you want to see more of that, please reach out to Just Hockey, tell them it's useful, and buy something from them. Check out that link in the description to them. You guys supporting me to do these videos will help them as well to make them want to do more of them, and it shows them that they're useful. So hopefully I can do more in the future. And if you want to support the channel and Just Hockey because this video was helpful, check out the link in the description to them. Clicking that link, making a purchase gives me a kickback to help support the channel so I can make content and doing more videos. If you want to support the channel without buying anything through Just Hockey, click the link in the description to Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon. Everything through any of those links in the description always comes back into the channel so I can keep making more content and doing more videos. Thank you very much for watching and take it easy.
You're watching HockeyReviews.ca.